as well as I'm going to talk about building your brand on YouTube. Those are two completely separate things, but let me kind of explain how they are 100% related to each other. So in 2015 is kind of where it begins for me, because that's when my wife and I both retired professionally. And being new empty nesters, we decided, hey, we're going to go and do the retirement thing. So we did that for about 5 years, stepped back from homesteading because we had done that for a number of years. And we just wanted a little less off our plate. We wanted to live the dream, as most people that live a traditional life want to do. But 2020 came around, which changed a lot of things for us, and probably a lot, for you guys as well. But we decided at that point that we were going to re-engage on the homestead, start doing more of our animal production again, start growing more of our vegetables. We also started listening to a lot of freedom-minded podcasts and other creators. And that's when I was introduced to a young lady named Nicole Sauce, right about that time. And she happened to be on a podcast called Unloose the Goose. Some of you guys might remember that. And flash forward another couple of years, and in 2022, I happened to hear Nicole talking to John on a live stream, and she was saying, people should invest into themselves. They should stop sitting on the sidelines and maybe come down here to Self-Reliance Festival and meet some people. And so that's what I did. I took Nicole's advice. I got in my car. I drove down to Tennessee with that in mind. And it was everything that I kind of hoped it would be and more. But the more part that I didn't realize at the time didn't really hit me until I started driving home, because I drove out here from California and I had 3 days to drive home. And that's when it hit me about the inspiration that I gathered from all the people that were there. And like I say, literally, I did not even anticipate that. But I mean, I was on fire by the time I got home. And I started doing a lot of things, and I was inspired to a couple of the things I was thinking about. One was changing the direction of my social media channel. So I decided to rebrand my channel from what it was, and that's what I'll be talking about tomorrow. And the other was this off-grid water system that had really kind of been rolling around in my head for 20 years or more. And where that originated from was this little patch of green grass that I saw in my pasture that never went away, but some years it would get bigger, some years it would shrink. And when I would open up the pasture, when I would open up that gate, the cows would run up to that first. There was a few little weeds up there, and then that's, they cued in on that. And so I knew that there was something had to be there. And even on a couple of occasions that I can recall, I went up there armed with hand tools, dig-in bar, post hole digger, dug down a couple of 2-3 feet, and I just never really came up with much. I was pretty discouraged by it. But again, after having gone out to Self-Reliance Festival, I ran into Tag and I heard him speak, and I'm sure you guys are probably pretty well aware who he is from Life Gun Free, Rowdy Meyer. And it just further really drove into my head the need for me to actually do something. It inspired me to decide to pull the trigger on that project that I'd been thinking about for all these years. And so I went home. I got with one of my buddies in my network, and I asked him to bring his tractor down one afternoon, and we just did this exploratory trench, not really knowing what I'd find, hoping that I might find something. And so what it is it's a little, probably about 200 feet from my house out in the pasture. I don't have a lot of elevation on my property. And so it was just this little knoll out there where that green patch of grass would grow and shrink. And so we cut this trench. It was probably 40 feet long, maybe 3 feet deep on average, and just a bucket width. So, 20 inches wide or so. And that first day I was a little actually disappointed in what I saw. I didn't really see much at all. It was merely just a little bit of sweat on some of the clay and on the rocks and such. And I didn't give it much promise. Even the next day when I went back, I looked at it, and there was maybe a couple of little puddles in there. And but after about 9 or 10 days, it started to, I was getting water about that deep in some areas. Of course, the bottom of this wasn't completely level. But I started to think at that point that maybe it was something worth pursuing beyond what I'd already done. And I have to be honest, I did not know how I was going to capture this water. I didn't have a clue. Well, I had a clue, but I didn't exactly know the correct direction to go. So I did, like most of us probably do, is go to the internet, right? And start searching around. I went to YouTube University. And yeah, I came across this one guy that I kind of bought off on his design. And essentially what I put in is a French drain. And the thing that resonated with me from this dude was that he said, hey, this is what I do for a living. He says, the one thing that people either don't know about or they, as a contractor, decide to save money and not do, is he says they don't line the trench with this impervious fabric. And so I thought, this makes perfect sense. This guy's, he's making sense to me. So that's essentially what I did is I assembled these materials. And my goal for this project to start with was to try to make it as least amount of interaction that I would have to have with it. I didn't want to have to power it. I didn't want to have a lot of moving parts. So that's what really appealed to me about this guy's design. So essentially all this is I lined this trench with this impervious fabric. And then I got the 4-inch flexible perforated drain pipe, got 100 feet of it. And then I laid it in the trench with the open end kind of on the downhill side. And then I ran it up and then doubled it back. So I've got essentially 2 lines in the bottom of this. And then the 2 open ends I ran back into a Y and some different combination of reducing fittings. I brought it back down into a 1-inch PVC line. And then that 1-inch PVC line went into a junction box where I was able to put a valve on the end of that. So I could close the valve and essentially capture that water and allow it to fill up in this French drain. But I guess at this point, I still really didn't know if it was worth pursuing beyond that because I had no idea how much I'd actually captured. So essentially what I did from that point was I wanted to see how much I would collect in 24 hours. So I looked at my watch, closed the valve, and then Rebecca and I, my wife, we came back 24 hours later with a few fittings, 5-gallon bucket, and a garden hose, see how much we could fill that, how many times we could fill that 5-gallon bucket. And I was pretty surprised to find out that in that first 24-hour period, we had accumulated 77 gallons. And it just blew me away because then I pulled out my calculator and I started shaking it out to 365 days, and that was 27,000 gallons of water. And at that point, I mean, I was just like, I was so excited because I didn't even, first of all, know if this would work. And then secondly, the amount of water that I had accumulated in just this trench that not long ago, I wasn't even seeing anything in, it just blew me away. And so again, I wanted to pursue the next step. And the next step beyond that exploration phase was the storage phase, right? Seems logical. So I wanted to have a minimum of 3,000 gallon above ground tank was kind of the minimum that I wanted to get. And so I did a little research on that, but the problem was I had no idea at this point whether or not that would work because I was just estimating how much fall I actually had into this tank. I only really, from what I could gather, had about 7 to 7.5 feet of fall from the source to the site. And since water storage tanks have an inlet that comes in at the top of the tank, I needed an inlet that was less or equal to that amount of fall. So essentially what I did at that point was ran my line from that first junction box, trenched about 150, 175 feet, I think it was, down to another at the site, and then put a valve on it, ran up a temporary 1/2-inch line straight up in the air. And then I opened up the valve, got up on a ladder and trimmed it down until I could see where I actually had water flowing. And it turns out I actually had water flowing at 8.5 feet. So I was completely stoked that I was wrong on my estimation, but I was more than happy because the tank that I was looking at, that 3,000 gallon tank, was had a 7.5 foot inlet. So at that point, I knew that I was like good to go as far as putting that tank in. And so that's what I did. I purchased a tank, put it in, got the water plumbed into that. So now I've got the first 2 phases of this 3-phase operation or 3-phase project complete. So I've been able to locate capture water, and then I've been able to store water. And so I've been taking measurements month to month to see where I'm at as far as how much I'm actually collecting on a daily basis. And now remember that 77 gallons was based on right after the Self-Reliance Festival. It was late in the fall. We had not yet received any amount of rain at all. And so that was on a dry year. So that was the lowest that I've actually seen that flow, was 77 gallons. And I took a measurement prior to coming here on Saturday, and it's flowing 900 gallons a day right now. Yeah, so it's a pretty significant increase for us on our property. I mean, obviously water resiliency is the thing that people, when they have it, they take it for advantage, granted. But I live in an area that doesn't have water flowing everywhere. It's very dry in the summertime, and we've actually, when we do get periods of drought, which we've had over the last few years, there's a lot of talk about water rationing and all this sort of stuff, which doesn't affect us being on a well. But what does affect us is people start losing their wells. And fortunately, we've got a really deep well. It's a pretty good well, but only having that one source is not a good idea. We also have other redundancies. We have rainwater catchment. We also have a big swimming pool we can utilize if push comes to shove. This is actually going to be like a 4th water source for me. But the nice part about it is it'll be completely non-dependent on having rain. It's just going to flow. Now again, the flow is going to vary based on how wet or dry the year is, but understand that's never dried up. There's always been that green patch of grass up in my pasture. So I feel pretty comfortable that this is going to produce for us even on those years where we might be water restricted. So obviously at this point I've got a surplus of water. I've got some options. I could either go above ground and add additional tanks, expand my footprint, or I could do something like doing something in ground, maybe excavating a pond or a reservoir or something like that, which would be super smart and valuable to me. But that's not really the next phase of what I'm going to be pursuing. The last phase of this project for me is distribution. And although right now I'm hooked up to it and I can gravity flow out, and I've got it plumbed to about 120 or so trees that I water with this source right now, but it's not pressurized in any regard. And so I'm going to do something very simplified, keeping in with the theme of this particular project. I want it to be very low tech. So I'm going to do something along the lines of maybe having a 12-volt battery powered pump that's solar supported with a single panel, and just be able to control it in that way. So I might need to be talking to Sean just to see what his thoughts are on, just some ideas. But
only you were at a workshop where you could do that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'd like you guys to get from this talk, guys, is not about how to put in a French drain. That's really not what this is about. You can go on YouTube, you can research that information yourself. What I'd like you to understand is that, several things had to come into alignment in order for a project like this to occur. The first of which is really just being observant. And one of permaculture's 12 principles is observation and interaction. And it's super important when you're on your property, when you're just in your daily life, just being observant around you. But particularly like as a homesteader, to be looking at what the land is trying to tell you. Because if I had not keyed in on that little green patch of grass or paid attention to what my cows were doing, that water might just still be there as an untapped resource. So it's really super important to just be observant, and that's one of the things that had to happen for this project to actually come into view for me. I would say the next thing that's pretty important is don't allow the limitations of your own knowledge to prevent you from doing something. Because truth be told, I didn't know what I was doing when I started this 100%, right? I just kind of went at with a hunch. And that's really important because I believe that if you want something bad enough, you're going to find a way to make it happen. And I also realize that, there's a lot of different ways to skin the same old cat. There's a lot of different ways to approach solving a problem. And it's really an unconventional solution to a very conventional problem, which is people finding water on their property and developing it. So just keep that in mind. And then the last thing I would say that's really, really important to this being a project that is where it is today is just the fact that I put myself around other people that are going to inspire me to do this. Had I not taken Nicole's advice and got in my car and drove down there, this might not even be a thing. And I could almost assure you that I wouldn't be here talking to you today had I not decided to invest into myself and go down there and make it happen. So you guys are already here, right? You're here. And that's half the battle. But the other half of the battle, like Nicole was talking about, was going out there and actually committing to something and making it happen. So that's kind of where I'd like to leave it. I don't have a full hour to talk about this system, but I've got all of your time. If you guys have any questions about this system or anything else you want to ask me, I am open for that right now. Yes.
So that water that you dug, or that's in those French drains or whatever, that's for your cattle? Like, what did you do before you did that for them for water?
Oh, no, they drink off of the well.
Okay.
All of our water troughs,
Like water troughs, yeah, okay.
and everything is plumbed from our domestic use water. But I wanted, those redundancies there. And so this water, in fact, I've tested it, but I haven't done third-party water testing. That's kind of expensive and it's like a big deal. And I just haven't gone down that road. But what I have done is I've purchased a few different of those testing kits that you can get off Amazon. I purchased 2 different ones, and then I've run 2 tests from 2 different testing sources, I guess, if you will, comparing it against my domestic water coming out of my well, and it actually tested cleaner on both tests. So, if there was something that I plan to drink, I would certainly probably run it through some kind of a filtration system. I'm not just going to probably drink it without filtering it, because I don't know where the water's coming from or whatever, but it's obviously coming down and hitting some kind of an impervious layer, and then it's moving horizontally.
But it is good enough for your livestock.
Give to my chickens, give to my cows. It's great for watering your trees.
Yes.
It's great for everything other than just drinking it right out of the tap. And I don't know that I wouldn't do that either. I mean, I drink some pretty nasty ass water. So
is Joel Salatin.
So you said you right at this point in the year, you're looking at 900 gallons per day, and you have right around 3,000 gallon tank. So all that extra water, you just shut it off and let it absorb into the ground normally where it comes from?
Yeah, I've got a bypass coming out of that second, right where I did that test when I ran it up. That's where I have my bypass, and I just turn the valve there to keep it from going into my tank. Now, if I let it go directly into my tank, all it's going to do is just cascade out over the top of it. But I just direct it into the pasture, and I'm actually going to be planting some things there. I just planted some watermelon and stuff in that location. So
you just created a kind of like your own spring from that water source into your pasture so that things can grow.
Yeah.
Now, is it eroded anything or created a natural? It's just run out with the water.
No, it's just running out, and actually you can see where the grass is actually a lot better because of the nutrient that is coming in from that source. There's like the grass is like this high, and everywhere else, in places where it's not like that, it's like this, I will say this, like in my state, you don't have the ability to just go and do what you want to do, right? If the Department of Water Resources knew that I put this in on my property, they'd raise hell. And so I really wanted to, and it's up kind of by the road. So I wanted to keep this on the DL, essentially. I didn't want to like broadcast what I was doing. Most of my neighbors are cool, but you know how that is. All it takes is one person like, hey, what's he doing over there?
So then if you were to put it or plummet into a pond, that would draw more attention to it, or I mean, from that point, it's just groundwater being
Yeah,
captured in a pond.
I would assume that it probably could, because as you probably are well aware, most of everything moving forward from now is being analyzed through imagery from Google Earth. You know, that's how they're assessing our properties. They're not coming onto our properties. They're looking at it from the sky. So actually, when I put this system back in, I wanted to do this as quickly as I could. So when I ran that line from the source down to the site, I did that in about 4 hours. I got my son down and we trenched that. We did the thing, put it in, and then I hooked up to my disc and I disked that whole area. So it didn't show a line going from point A to point B. I just wanted it to look like this disked area.
And then reseeded pasture.
Yeah, well, weeds have taken it over at this point, but yes. So that's the environment where I live, and I'm sure it's probably much different in freer states or what have
And
you.
the water right, the approach to water rights are very different here.
Mhm.
I just went down that rabbit hole because of Oregon's
Right.
recent. Yeah, I was like, whoa! I just spent way too many hours reading about water rights in different states.
Right.
But-
Yeah. You know, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, guys.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm just somebody who had an idea and I pursued it. And you know, I won't say that I got lucky, but I'm definitely fortunate to have been able to get this established. And all those things had to actually be present in order for it to occur.
Is there something you can do with shaping the land to improve your pasture from
Well-
that area?
What would improve my pasture is getting some more cover on it and not overgrazing it, as I've done for many years.
Mhm.
I got pretty poor pasture. Overgrazing is not really what you want to do. But also, too, the thing that makes my pasture less likely to become anything beyond a prairie or savanna is I don't have any water. Where you guys have water in the summertime, it's brown, you know, and that earth it's just being scorched by the sun, and there's erosion and there's all these things. But I mean, if I had amendment, if I had something I could cover the soil, it would start to develop that soil life a little bit. And then if I were to put seed upon it, and you know, some perennial type seeds that are multi-species, then you know I could have a chance in doing that. But it's just like the environment that we're in, it just doesn't really promote that kind of development where you actually get to see multiple layers of a forest start to develop over time. That's just the downfall of where I live, you know. But yeah, if I had water, I could totally do it.
What's the acreage size of your pasture area out there we're talking about?
Well, my entire property is 22 and a half.
Okay.
And that front pasture, I've never mapped it out, but I would say that front pasture is probably, I don't know, 5.5, 6 acres, maybe, something like that.
Do you know what the pitch is on it? How sloping it is it?
As far as a pitch, it's relatively flat. Like I said, there's only about 7.5 feet coming off that little knob. I only have 41 feet all the way to the top of my property to where my house site is.
Okay.
You know, I might have a little bit more going all the way to the back of the property. And there's a depression and a pond back there, but it doesn't hold water because it just seeps right through. I need to put some clay or bentonite in there or something to try to fix that. But that was another consideration of mine as I was considering taking that water, instead of just having it flow in, I was going to pump it to the high side of my property. And then I would be able to have it gravity feed back into my system. But the problem is with only 41 feet, it's not going to be worth your while. You're still going to have to assist it.
Yeah.
You're going to need more because there's 43 feet, or excuse me, 43 feet per 100 PSI.
Okay.
So if you had 43 feet, you'd be able to get 100 PSI. Is that right?
Oh, wait. 100 feet is 43 PSI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I had it backwards, but it wouldn't have panned out. I only had actually, when I calculated, it was only like, I don't know, 7.5 PSI or something, or 17 PSI. I think it was 17.
Minus the friction on the pipe.
Right.
What I was trying to get information about is second, third-hand information here. There is a program through the U.S. Department of Agriculture somewhere about swales.
Mhm.
And they will supposedly help subsidize the development of swales to slow down the water.
Not interested.
Yeah, but I'm saying go after the information,
Oh, sure,
not let them into your business as such.
right,
But a swale may cause less interaction from the county and the governments. If they say, what are you doing? You say, I'm slowing the erosion here, terracing, or
Sure.
whatever the proper term is, or something like that. And that may be something that if anybody, the nosy neighbor gets in, you say, oh, this is the government blessed program for terracing and slowing water erosion.
sure.
Just have more things on your backside.
Yeah, no,
do
that's a good suggestion.
And terracing will slow the water and it'll help capture what moisture you do get and saturate it so you'll get more flow in your area anyway.
Right.
What is your annual rainfall there?
It varies, from year to year. I would say that like average is around 40 inches on a good year, but we've had a lot of years that weren't so good years. They're 20 and less.
And it's
So-
pretty seasonal.
Oh, what do you mean seasonal?
Like you're not getting rain every month. You're getting all your rain in certain.
Yeah, it's in between. Generally speaking, you can expect maybe first rains early, like in October 15th, and then you're pretty much done by May, right? You might get some showers, like we're getting a shower, I think, today or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely summer months are dry
Yeah.
and it's hot, and so I appreciate what you say about the swales, and that's something I've actually considered doing. But again, once you put those in, it changes the course of what you can do within that pasture.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not something I haven't considered, and I'm not opposed to it. It would actually be a lot easier now that I have a tractor with a backhoe on it. So
Well, a swale can be as a height change of this much
sure,
over 30 or 40 feet. It doesn't have to be the ditch with a big berm. It can be very, very subtle
sure,
as long as if you don't get a rain event more than 2 or 3 inches at a time maximum, then it doesn't have to be deep at all.
Mhm.
It just has to be wide and it will hold a whole lot of water.
right,
And I will say also, I have the opposite problem that you have. We have too much water and we have water at velocity.
nice,
So it can be just as, if not more destructive to the property. So we can walk back and I can show you what used to be 15 to 20 feet of bare slab granite that now has stuff growing on it just because I threw a bunch of sticks on the ground. I mean, granted, it was a little bit more than just.
He'll be
throwing
doing a
sticks on the
property
ground,
walk at
but-
5:30.
Okay.
yeah, that'd be a good thing to see.
So,
Yeah.
I'm wondering,
Maybe 4:30.
how did your homestead change from when you had it before you retired and then when you restarted?
How did what?
How did your homestead change? Like, did you do different animals, different amounts, or did you kind of just go back to what you were doing?
I will say this is that my homestead journey has always been one that's been fairly scaled back with respect to the amount of animals I've had on my property, only because I grew up on a farm where I saw what overcrowding leads to, right? And so I always kind of had a minimalist approach as it relates to that. And it's evolved over the course of years where I've seen that I want to have even less. And so where I'm at now on my homesteading journey with regard to my animals is I really want to just have enough animals on my property that I can actually sustain without feeding them. And that's kind of where I've been trending. So that's been an evolution. But, it's involved. I mean, I've been doing this since I was a kid from the standpoint of growing up on a homestead and being a farmer. But homesteading with my wife on our property, we've been there since 2000. And, you pull into a place and you have all these ambitions and things you want to do. And then other distractions come in and things change and you let those projects die, and you move on to other things that take precedent or priority. So I don't know, it's in a constant state of evolution because I kind of wanted to, at some point, step back away from that. But then COVID came, right? And it caused me to reconsider what I was doing with my efforts. And so I decided to kind of ramp things back up. I don't know if that answered what you were looking for.
I was really more wondering if, during that break, if anything changed where you made like a significant change from before or after, or is it just that kind of continuing evolution just picked up again?
What break are you talking about?
We said you basically retired and you kind of stopped homesteading and you started again with 2020? I think.
We never stopped homesteading.
Okay.
We just did less of it. So we could go out and we didn't have as many animals at the house. We sold off a bunch of cows and other livestock. So we could essentially take some of the keys off our key ring, right? And just have fewer keys on our key ring so we could travel and be doing the retired thing. So I wouldn't say that we stopped doing it. It's just that was a real big trigger for us. I feel as though I learned a lot from 2020 because a lot of things opened my eyes when I saw what I saw during that period of time. So, yeah.
How many cows are you running on that 6 acres, and what other animals do you have?
We've got 22 acres. Oh, you mean the front pasture?
Yeah.
No, it's just my property is cross fenced. I cross fence certain areas so that I could.
Rotate them.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've never had more than 15 head on our property, just because I don't like feedlotting animals. I used to buy truck and trailer load of hay. It's a lot of feed, man, and cost of everything now. It just doesn't pencil out for me. So I'm not trying to have a bunch of animals on there. But as far as how many we would run on that, not many, because the acres per head that you can run on ground that doesn't grow good grass, you're feedlotting, and I just don't do that.
I want to get back on the thing you said about it seems like you're hesitant about putting any swales in because it what it can restrict. So do you say plant crops in any of those at certain times, or do you try to harvest hay from it? What's the limitation that you're looking at, and what your worries are as far as expanding that way? What's your reasoning?
It's not really much of a worry, quite honestly. It's something I'm actually still considering. I'm just saying that if you do it, you need to understand that it's going to change the course of the land moving forward. It's going to be very hard to undo certain things. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm not saying that it needs to be some deep trench. It could be something fairly minimal. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. And actually, I have a V ditch that I cut on my property when I first moved there that is essentially a swale, except it has fall to it. It's not on contour, right? It has a very minimal fall that goes from the front of my property to the back, going back to that pond. And I put that there because my first winter, I saw that, oh shit, everything's flooding toward my house. It was just standing water,
Yeah.
and it wasn't going anywhere. So that culvert that came underneath the road, I hired some guy to come out with a grader, and he shot his laser and got it to fall 2% all the way to the back. And so I have that, and I've actually gone into that ditch, and I've put different checks so that the water goes down and hits those checks, and it's holding on my property at this point. I've got water holding in that right now. So it's just that kind of concept I'm fully embracing. I'm just wanting to point out that I'm not anti-swale. I'm just saying that I need to further evaluate what I really want to do with that piece of property before I commit to digging holes.
Yeah,
Restrict
access.
or anything,
Yeah.
Access.
Yeah.
It's very important to think about. Is there a question?
I just now let them know they could
Okay.
ask a question, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have something?
Yeah,
Good-
a couple,
pretty good
maybe
amount of people
2 or 3 little things.
Yeah.
But number one, would that be the source of the water, underground spring, or do you know? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I have noticed other areas on other people's property where I've seen similar areas that are growing. In fact, just across the road above me, I'm assuming they have the same thing because there's Bermuda grass growing there year round, just like it did on my property. And so what I'm assuming, because as I dug down and I got to see kind of the layers of earth, there's different layers in there. There's some rockier section, and you hit clay and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking they're just coming down and they're hitting an area where the water can no longer permeate. It's probably hitting a clay layer, and then it's moving horizontally, and until it comes out where it's poking to the surface. You see, that's kind of how I really only see that on areas that are hillside. You don't really see it where they're completely flat. It's just where the water comes down and it hits that impervious layer and then punches out.
The impervious fabric or material, what is that?
I don't. It's just a cloth type of a thing. I can't
like
say exactly what it is.
Geotextile?
Yeah.
fabric? Okay.
I think that's exactly what it is. now that I recall.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is, but it's essentially just kind of like a cloth fabric. And yeah, that's going to probably extend the life of my system by a considerable amount now that the sediment is just not going to work its way in and clog up that pipe, right?
And one more then. Do you think you could take, you've got 2 runs of big O pipe or whatever you want to call it in there. You think you could put 2 more in there and double the amount of water coming out? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I could have totally went on top of that and done another whole deal. And,
Okay.
and what that would actually probably done for me, it would have bought me more time in the future as well. Because maybe down low, the sediment's going to plug that up.
Right.
You lose those pipes, but you've got the ones above it. Plus, it's just more flow out of those pipes. So it would have probably been a better idea to do that. I just didn't do that. Yeah.
So one of the reasons I asked you to talk about this is when we talk about developing water on our property, we look for a spring that's bubbling up, or we dig a well.
Mhm.
And what you did was you found a green place, and when you dug down, you had tacky clay, and you're like, this is water. So the fact that you even saw that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I think again, it really just boils down to being observant. That's where this whole project originated from, was just paying attention to something that was there that we a lot of times probably walk right by every day and we don't see because we're in too big of a hurry to go to the next thing. But it's really important when you're, again, on your property, to just go out with your cup of coffee in the morning or when you're out feeding the animals, to try to pay attention to what the weather's trying to tell you. Try to pay attention to what the animals are trying to tell you. Take note of those changes, and you'll never notice those changes unless you're being observant on your property. If you're just walking from point A to point B and you don't take the time to do that, there's like I said, there's 12 permaculture principles. Some of them I really think about often, and that's one of them.
And that's exactly how I found both of the spots that I'm developing, was walking around with a cup of coffee first thing in the morning,
Yeah, super huge.
just by observation.
His mugs are probably out there on the post up high.
I'm still missing a red coffee
Yeah, there's a red
cup.
coffee cup somewhere if anybody finds it.
No.
How many years did you look at that spot and just think,
20.
yeah,
Yeah, I noticed it like probably the first summer, when things are all dry and I'm just like, what's that all about? It's just like, it wasn't that big. And then sometimes it would get almost the size of a sheet of plywood, and then it would shrink back down. But it never, like I said, never went away. It was always there. And it's just one of those signals that if you don't pay attention to, you'll never see it,
how many years between when you went out there with a pickaxe or whatever, dug a little, and then finally decided to get somebody in? And what was the catalyst that made you decide to take another chance and dig more?
Oh, to go up there and hand dig again?
Yeah, so what was that? So I guess number one, you went first and didn't have a lot of success.
Yeah.
And then how far between that and the actual project?
Gosh, I don't know. I think it was probably a number of years. I would say more than 5 to 7. Probably. I can't really nail that one down for you, but I can tell you that the thing that made me think about it more and want to go up there again was that people were losing their wells, and I was thinking, oh, I got to do something about this. Maybe there's water there, but I wasn't equipped to actually pursue it in the right way. I needed actually that equipment to help me and assist me, and that's something that also was spawned out of this 2020 experience, is the community that I've been able to develop, our network that we've been able to put together since 2020. And community's the thing, man. You have something, Ken? Oh, no. Right on. Any other questions you guys got for me? That's it? That's all you got?
Do you hay?
No.
Okay.
No, we used to though, but that was only on leased ground. And we didn't have all the haying equipment, but we'd get guys in. We'd do the planting, right? We had a seeder and stuff, and we'd plant. And then we'd have somebody come in and do the cutting and baling and stuff for us. But that proved to be not something we wanted to do. That was one of those learning lessons, right? That you realize it's probably just easier to pay somebody who actually does this. And, it's a lot of work, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have your pastures divided up, and you limit the number of animals because you don't want to put too much pressure on the ground, along with the hay. So by reducing your numbers, rotating your animals, how much hay do you have to import onto your property to sustain them and other dry times?
Right. I didn't feed my sheep at all last year.
Really?
Yeah.
So you managed to manage your ground.
Yeah, we had six sheep,
That's awesome.
a ram and 5 ewes.
Yeah.
And they basically lived in a sheep tractor.
That's
And
cool.
I moved that thing anywhere from 2 to sometimes 4 times a day, which is a lot. I get it. If you're not a retired guy that has time to go out and do that, you're not doing that. But
Is
I
that
was,
why you didn't bring your wife here? She's trying
don't say it.
Oh,
Totally true.
She's watching right now.
Yeah, totally true.
When you get home.
Yeah, no, she's holding it down there, man. But that's
How about for your cows? Do you still have to import?
same deal. Same deal. I've got a cow right now. She's probably going to die this year, and I hate to say that, but she's one of the best cows I ever had. I wanted to get rid of her because she was a dink, and I was like, yeah, we're going to ship her. And my wife pleaded with me. She's like, no, we got to keep her. She's cute, right? Right? And she turned out to be one of the best cows that we ever had. I'm serious. I've never kept a cow that I haven't shipped. And so she's going to be one that I bury on that property, only out of respect for what she's been able to do. She's had 2 sets of twins. She's had calves every year, and I don't feed her jack. I mean, I did when we were showing her and early on when we got there, but she lives on the property. She eats dried grass. She eats green grass. Some years she looks good. Some years she doesn't. I don't worm her. I don't do anything to her. She just lives there. And that's the way ruminants actually, in my opinion, should be. But that's not the industry that we've created with commercialization of our animals. You know, it's a different way to raise animals. And I'm not saying I grew up in that way, but if you think about it, that's what deer do. They don't look super good, right? They got ticks on them and they're skinny and all that, but they're ruminants too. And what do? They get by, right? And that's kind of the system that I wanted to try to transition to. Now, obviously, if you're feeding something out, we just butchered a steer last week, and I had him on grain for over 5 months, right? Grass-fed, grain finished, and that's the way I prefer to eat my beef. I'm not a grass-fed guy, but different scenarios, I guess, call for different things, and that's just kind of how I view it. So I've been doing that to scale back on my property intentionally. You know, like I say, I could have tons of animals there. I got more than enough space to put more animals, but I just don't want to do that.
I did have one question.
Mhm.
Have you looked into key line plowing versus the swales?
I've heard of that. What? Explain that. I'm not
Basically,
familiar.
from my understanding, you take a deep plow, you go 2-3 feet deep, and you plow on contour, and it opens up the ground to where water can go into that, kind of slowly seep in.
Yeah.
Same idea as swales, but basically you're just cutting a long narrow trench in.
Yeah, that'd be super good. Yeah, I'd be in favor of trying something like that because, I mean, the more you can keep water on your property, the better. The problem is that it goes somewhere else. And when it goes somewhere else, it's taking nutrients with it. It's taking soil with it. It's contributing to erosion and all those things.
I just didn't know if that was something you had considered or looked into
No, I mean,
versus changing the whole
It's
slope
something
of
I
the ground
would
and everything.
consider on your property.
Huh?
It's something I would consider on your property. I would do it in my pasture, other than the fact that I can't because rocks.
right.
Got that issue.
How deep do you generally go with that? To get
I've
your
never
dip?
done it.
I'll look into it, man. That's interesting because, like I say, I'm not opposed to doing that. The more water you can keep on your property, the better.
I think those subsoilers are like 18 inches below grade.
Yeah.
I've seen them up to, I think, 3 feet.
All right.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the implement called a subsoiler,
You just said that.
I heard of them. Yeah.
which is just a blade that goes down on a straight shank, nothing wide on it?
Yeah.
That's what a key line is. It's several of those in tandem that just puts fingers straight down in their depth appropriate towards your hard pan area.
I got you.
And then any rain seeps the little cracks down there and just saturates that rather than taking the time to run off it. It grabs it.
Yeah. No, that's really great
And if
because
you do it on contour or close to contour, you can get the water drop straight in, or if it's a little bit off contour, then you can sort of aim it towards your swale or whatever your low point you want to try to catch it to.
right.
And you can pick up a subsoil or something like that for $300 or $400 if you got a tractor and, a few podcasts to listen to, just
Yeah.
kill your day and then do that and be done with it.
Yeah, I'll
Then find somebody that's
definitely look
sucker
into
about the thing and you're done with it.
Yeah. Here's an example of why that's important is because just for example, on my property, the areas where water's coming in those low areas where it comes off of my neighbor's property or it comes across the road into that V ditch that I cut, grass is this tall right now. Super green, looks good. The stuff that's that way and that way doesn't look so good.
Yeah.
So it's just a real visual indicator of how beneficial keeping those nutrients are on your property when it comes from somebody else's property into that waterway.
Yeah.
So.
We got maybe 2 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take any questions you guys got.
I got one more for you.
Yeah.
Did you ever, because you talked about kind of wanting to stay a little incognito, so that, did you ever think about below ground cistern at all? Like, no, not worth it for you, or just?
I don't know
Okay.
really the benefits of doing that. But I guess from the standpoint of being stealth, right? Being in ground, that would be.
But you could just add a whole hell of a lot more storage.
Yeah.
Without the prying eye, right?
Yeah, that's very true. You're still gonna have to get it out of that system though. So you're gonna have to pump it, which is fine. Yeah.
I just wondered if it was something that worked with your,
Yeah.
because you don't have a frost line to deal with, I assume. So,
No.
which means you can leave it above ground, but I was thinking you could just basically skim over top of it, right?
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with putting a water storage tank on your property. So when next time Google Earth looks at my property and sees a water storage tank,
Right.
it's not gonna, the county's not gonna go, hey, what's that? I need to go out there and look at it. You can store your own water. It's just harvesting water where the Department of Water Resources doesn't know the government's gonna wanna, hey, you can't do that. And I just wanted to try to make it happen as quickly as possible and keep it as, out of the public eye as I could.
I'm sorry, I came a little bit later. You might have covered this in the beginning, but when you saw that patch, or if, say I were to see a patch, what would be the first step into analyzing or accessing it?
Well, what I did essentially was just cut a trench underneath that to see if anything would develop, and it took 9 to 10 days for me to actually have enough water in there for me to even consider pursuing something beyond that.
Okay.
So, at first glance, I was like, this ain't working, man. This isn't too promising. Even the next day wasn't promising. But after about 10 days, there was about that much water in some spots. And then the wheels started clicking that maybe I should pursue it further.
How deep did you dig the initial trench?
3 feet.
Oh, okay.
They're about,
Okay.
yeah, 3 feet. And it was about 40 feet long, just to kind of encompass that whole area that I thought maybe water could be. And I kept it lower on one side, higher on the other by a little bit so that water will drain out of it. I suppose you could, if it had a level, you could do something in the middle, essentially making like a T. It would work. It doesn't have to be on, on slope or anything. But, yeah.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
We hit 12:15.
Turns out we can talk about water for an hour.
I needed help from you guys, man. I can't sit up there and spitball, for an hour on that. But
Could we say you really whet our appetite?
I hope not.
That was really bad.
Yeah.
I apologize.
That was awesome.
You're not
Thanks
funny.
for the-
Tip
Is that
your
the
waiters.
is
You're
that
not
the
funny.
first apology or the second?
Both. It'll just continue. It's a continuous apology. So we got 15 minutes for lunch up the hill here right away, and then back down here at 1:15.
Is Tactical still here?
Hang on, I can tell you.
Okay, so
Did it work?
if you want to see,
1:45. Okay.
yeah, if you want to see the sheep
What are you doing? You just recording all
system
this?
pasture, it's actually further that way, and he's taking people down there to show them now, so you don't have to walk double. If you'd like to go, just check that out. And
Hang
you'll
on,
get to
left
see
is
little sheep, and she'll probably try to follow him home, so that's kind of fun.
He's made a good wet nurse. So,
Yeah,
yes.
he is a great wet nurse.
Yes. So other than that, we got lunch up there. If you want to hang a left down on the road, get down and see Tactical play with the sheep, and if not, hang a right, come out and get some grub.
If you want to put wares out for sale under the carport, you're welcome to do that. We've got a few set up.
By the way,
No.
They're here.
No, I'm not worried about that.
Hey, how you doing?
Saturday night, you're eating ice cream.
If anybody needs a password for
So I've
Wi-Fi,
got
it's up here on the whiteboard.
somewhat similar situation. It's like,